Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. I am so excited to finally be doing my first true crime related video. As you guys know, I am a huge fan of true crime, the podcast community, the online community. Over the past couple of months, I kind of played with the idea of doing videos like these on my channel, but I wasn't sure how you guys were gonna react. But then I realized that a lot of you share the same interests as I do, and I need to do videos that I am personally interested in. That's why I'm starting this series on my channel. One thing I just want to say before starting out is that my goal with these videos is never to dramatize or sensationalize any of these cases. To me, it's really important to remember that these victims and these people who are missing or these people who have been murdered, these were real people. These are real people. They had hopes, they had dreams, they had aspirations, and on top of that, they also have real friends, real families, real loved ones, real lives that I think are really important to respect. All of these cases are horrifying enough as they are, and so I really wanted to give you guys the facts. And so I originally was planning to do a unsolved murder case as my first true crime related video on this channel. However, I decided to focus on a case from my first video that hit very close to home, and that is the disappearance of Jesse Galganov. This case hits very close to home because not only is the person from Montreal, he is also my age. He went to a private school that I am very familiar with. I also went to a private school in Montreal. So this could have happened to any one of my friends who have gone on these sorts of trips. And I just wanted to say that I've been following this case from the beginning when his family and friends first started using social media to their advantage. And this happened in October, and I remember everyone posting about Help Us Find Jesse on their Instagram stories, and then as is with so many heartbreaking events or tragedies or disappearances, people seem to forget. So why I really wanted to do this video is to hopefully tell you guys about Jesse, maybe even for the first time, this is the first you're hearing about him. I have to say that I thought I knew everything there was because I've read like every single news article even before I started researching this case. And from combing through all the articles and all the interviews that I can find, I have to say that I found out a few things that I did not know that I think are very suspicious. I have viewers from all over the world, and you never know, maybe someone's cousin was on the same trail as Jesse was. You never know who's going to be watching this video. I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a background on Jesse Galganov. So like I said, Jesse is 23 years old now. He was 22 at the time when he disappeared. He is from Montreal, Canada, but he does have dual citizenship with the United States, so he's a dual citizen. Jesse had just graduated from Wesleyan University in Connecticut, where he studied mathematics, and he also completed his pre-med studies. After he graduated from university, he decided to take a gap year. He had just completed all of his schooling, and so he wanted to take a gap year before attending medical school in the fall. He had been accepted to the Sidney Kimmel Medical School at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia, and he deferred for a year so he could take this gap year to explore the world, find himself, just spend some time not in school after completing so many years of studies. And his ultimate goal was to work with Doctors Without Borders. This is something that he was obviously very passionate about. Just looking at everything he's accomplished is amazing. All his friends and family describe him as someone who has a huge heart, super empathetic, always willing to help, and just from looking at some of his past accomplishments, it's really clear that he was a giver. He had worked as a coordinator for World Food Day. He was also a coordinator and co-chair for a nonprofit organization that focused on social justice. He was also really passionate about raising money for men's health, and for many years he grew a mustache during Movember and raised money for men's health. In addition to all of that, he was also a tutor, a researcher, and also an intern for a biopharmaceutical company. So this is where the story really begins. Jesse had planned his trip with his mother, Elisa Clayman, and he was leaving from Montreal on September 24th to travel the world. He had plans to explore South America and a bunch of different countries, eventually leading to Asia, before he was supposed to come home in May of 2018. He was carrying a backpack that apparently he had meticulously packed and unpacked and repacked to make sure he got everything right. Once Jesse got to Peru, he spent a few days in Lima, and his friends have said that he was Snapchatting, keeping them posted on what he was doing, posting pictures or stories on Instagram. So he was pretty connected to all his friends and family back home. On September 27th, after spending a few days in Lima, he took an overnight bus from Lima to Juarez, which is a small city in northern Peru, and he arrived there at around 6:30 a.m. And there is security footage of him leaving the bus station and heading towards a hostel where he was gonna stay for the night. He stayed at the Came House Backpacking Hostel, and he arrived there at around 6:30 a.m. and he spent the rest of the day getting supplies, getting food, getting ready for his hike that he was going to start the next day. Now this is where the first issue comes in, because if you are unfamiliar with hiking, especially at high altitudes, it is really important to give your body enough time to acclimate to the altitude. Another little suspicious thing that happened was the Came House hostel that Jesse stayed at initially acknowledged that he had checked in, but then they changed their story a little bit later on to say that Jesse had actually not stayed there, but because he had been Snapchatting up until that point with his friends did confirm that they did receive Snapchats from Jesse at the hostel. That day, he told his mom Elisa that he was going to be hiking the Santa Cruz Trail and that he probably wouldn't have service for 3 to 4 days. He allegedly left, and I say allegedly because up until a certain point, no one really knew if he actually made it to the trail. He told his mom that he was going to be leaving on September 28th for a 3 to 4 day trek through the Santa Cruz Trail, which is part of the Andes Mountains. His friends and family were expecting to hear back from Jesse by October 2nd, but October 2nd came and went and no one had heard anything from Jesse. At first, his parents and friends thought maybe he just took an extra day on the trail, which isn't really uncommon, but then days turned into weeks and everyone started getting very worried. Jesse's friend Julian Miller even told Dateline that Jesse was consistently messaging and Snapchatting with his friends. I know sometimes when people disappear, a lot of people say, well, maybe he didn't want to be found, but I truly do not believe that this is the case. He was in constant contact with his mother. He was uploading on Snapchat. He had plans to go to university in the fall. So for me, it just doesn't seem very likely that Jesse just wanted to live off the grid. It doesn't add up to me. Now I just want to talk to you a little bit about the Santa Cruz Trail, which is the trek that Jesse had planned and was on at the time of his disappearance. For a while, there was no proof that Jesse had even made it onto the trail, because on the day that he arrived, there was no logbook that was signed by Jesse or by any other hiker that day, which is very, very strange, because at the beginning of the trail, there's a sign that says, please sign in, or something to that effect, where you are supposed to sign in. But on that day, no hikers were signed in, which made learning more about who was on the trail, who may have seen him, way more difficult. The Santa Cruz Trail is considered one of the most beautiful in the world. They have these gorgeous blue, I don't know if they're called lagoons, but gorgeous blue, turquoise blue lakes, waterfalls. The views are spectacular, so it's a very popular trail. Peru actually defines or categorizes that trail as being moderate to difficult. However, as we get into it, it's not really moderate. It's actually a very difficult terrain. This trek has winding trails through the Cordillera Blancas Mountains, and it has an elevation of about 16,600 feet, so it's a pretty high mountain. Something to note about this trail is that you can either go independently or with a guide. Now, a lot of people do choose to complete the trail independently. However, especially if you're going alone, it's probably not recommended to go on the trail without a guide, because you never really know what can happen. So Jesse unfortunately did not go with a guide, and he took on the trail by himself. So like I said, the difficulty rating is moderate to difficult, and of course the difficulty ratings depend on experience, your physical shape, whether you're carrying your own backpack or whether you have a mule carrying your pack. All those things are variables in the difficulty rating. Hikers can expect to hike the trail for 6 to 8 hours a day, and like I said, the altitude is very, very high. And this plays a very important part because, like we talked about, Jesse had spent a few days in Lima, Peru, which is at sea level. So if you remember, he was in Lima, he took an overnight bus to Juarez, and then he was in Juarez for less than 24 hours, which is not enough time for your body to acclimate. And taking the time to acclimate is super, super important. If you don't, it can lead to acute mountain sickness. Acute mountain sickness, if not like taken care of, can also lead to more serious issues. So why it's so important to acclimate and give your body enough time to acclimate is because as you go higher and higher, the atmosphere changes and the density of the air becomes thinner. So this means there's a low concentration of oxygen in the air for your body to use. And especially if you are hiking up this mountain, which is apparently very difficult, you're climbing over rocks, it's not just a smooth little trail, you're exerting a lot of physical energy. And when you have acute mountain sickness, your body will panic and start pumping more blood and increase your breathing rate, which isn't really helpful. Symptoms of acute mountain illness are nausea, dizziness, headaches, shortness of breath, and even experienced hikers experience acute mountain sickness. It's recommended on the guides that I've looked at online that hikers should spend at least 2 to 3 days in Juarez, but I've read blogs of people who had spent even a week in Juarez and they had a really hard time getting up the mountain. They said that it felt like you were walking through quicksand. It was really hard to breathe. It's serious. In fact, Jesse's mother, Elisa Clayman, just completed the trail. She said that it was really important for her to complete the trail that Jesse was unable to.
I needed to do Jesse's trek from start to finish. I needed to do this in Jesse's honor. I had to walk in his footsteps of the last 2 known days of his life. I had to see what he saw. I wanted to honor my son. I wanted to see the trail for myself, but I wanted to honor him by doing what he wasn't able to do. I needed to do that both for me and for him. And see the places that they've been talking about. These were words on a page. And now I know what they look like. I know where he was. I saw what he saw.
And in her experience, she says that Peru is doing a disservice to its tourists by marking it as a moderate or difficult trail. Between the altitude and the complex terrain, it's an incredibly difficult hike, especially for people who go without a guide.
They advertise this trek as a moderate trek. It is not moderate by any stretch of the imagination. It is challenging. The altitude makes it so much more difficult. The terrain is challenging. It is not well marked. It's misrepresentation by Peru. If they say people come here to do this moderate trek and it's a safe national park, Huascara, it's really not.
These signs were either broken or incomplete, and without a guide, she thinks she'd still be wandering the mountain because it was that unclear. So although this trail is beautiful, it's really important to take the necessary time to prepare. Jesse had already purchased his return bus ticket back to Juarez on October 2nd, and he also had an outgoing flight on October 5th to Bolivia that was never used. Neither of them were used. And according to Jesse's friends, he was on a pretty strict budget because he was going on an 8-month journey around the world. So his friends really didn't think that Jesse would intentionally miss travel, especially a bus ticket and a plane ticket, because he was on such a tight budget. This is where things start getting very, very frustrating. Jesse had his phone at the time of the trip. Of course, he was Snapchatting his friends, keeping in contact with his friends. Like most people would probably think, they would think, okay, we need to get into his Apple ID, check his credit card statements, check all these statements to see if there was any activity or unusual activity that could maybe pinpoint where he was, or if he even got onto the trail, because you have to remember that because there were no logs kept that day, no one even knew for a while that Jesse had even made it onto the trail. Unfortunately, this is not just an issue at the entrance where Jesse entered the trail. This seems to be a common issue at the multiple other entrances, because I'm gonna get into this later, but once his mother had hired this Israeli search team, they wanted to get the logbooks from another entrance on the trail because their paths would have crossed Jesse's, but they also did not keep a complete logbook. So another thing that made things difficult, especially when time was of the essence, was the tech companies were not really that cooperative. I understand that companies need to respect the privacy of their users. However, I can guarantee that if I went missing or anyone went missing, I don't care who saw what on my phone, I would want them to be able to access my last iMessages or my last photos and see where I was and get a feel for where I was and what I was doing. Jesse's family and friends were desperate for answers, and they tried accessing his Apple ID, but I guess they couldn't get into it. They wanted to restore his last backup or access his iCloud. However, there was very little leeway from the cell phone providers, Apple, T-Mobile, and Amazon at first, because they also wanted to access his Kindle, and there was very little cooperation from those companies at that time. If you followed me on Instagram, you may remember me posting a petition of people basically pleading with these companies to release Jesse's pivotal information. Eventually, all three companies did release the data under court order. However, Apple released encrypted information that wasn't really useful. According to Apple, there were also communication issues between the Peruvian police and Apple. It wasn't a smooth, easy acquisition of this information, unfortunately, which I know must have been super frustrating for his family, his friends, and everyone who cared about this case. According to Apple, they complied immediately. Amazon refused to give any information until they received a court order, and and Jesse's cell phone provider was the last resource to provide the information. That was the first issue in the case that took a while to get things really moving. For a while, a lot of the leads were coming up empty, and like I said, they didn't even know if Jesse was on the trail. They were looking at all options. Did he even make it to the trail? Is he still in Juarez? And then the whole Came House hostel situation and the changing of the stories, it was very up in the air. There were so many different directions they could go. As the Canadians and even Americans, we are obviously a first world country, and so we do things a little bit differently. Peru, although a beautiful country, is a third world country, and their standards and their procedures are very different than in North America, which is understandable. I mean, I've had issues in the Dominican Republic where there are corrupt police. Like, it's not uncommon. After immense frustration, Elisa hired an elite Israeli search and rescue team called Magnus International Search and Rescue, and they are a very reputable search and rescue team based out of Israel. They are an elite search and rescue firm that have been active for 25 years. Their founder, Hillel, I hope I'm saying that right, Magnus, was a high-ranking official in the Israeli Defense Forces, and one of their principal occupations is to locate missing people abroad. They have unique methods and tools that they've actually been really successful in the past. Once Magnus was hired, their search started on November 8th, and they deployed a search and rescue team in Peru while also having a team of people working in Israel. Through their initial investigation, they were able to confirm Jesse's location on the trail, which up until that point, the Peruvian police weren't able to confirm or deny that Jesse had ever made it onto the trail. They analyzed all the evidence, the terrain, Jesse's psychological state, his projected route, and all the evidence that they had so far. They mapped out the multiple routes that Jesse could have taken, as well as using drones to sweep the areas. They conducted interviews. They also helped lead local investigators in the right direction. And most recently, they're also working with what I believe is an Ontario-based company to sweep the bodies of water.
7 months, I haven't heard from my son. Hard to think of where he could be alive, but there's always miracles, so I can always pray for a miracle.
And that's another thing. The issue is, you know, Magnus can come in and do all their investigations. However, they don't really have jurisdiction to conduct interviews, arrest, or anything like that. They've had to work with the Peruvian police, which according to Jesse's mother has not been the easiest, unfortunately. So through their investigation, they were able to confirm that Jesse was in fact on the trail, and there are a few sightings that unfortunately end on October 1st. And on September 30th, it was reported by 2 French tourists that Jesse had arrived at the second base camp and that he had stayed the night at the second base camp and then continued on his trek the next morning. These tourists report having breakfast with Jesse. The couple said that he arrived at the campsite on September 29th, that he was a little bit disorientated, and that he said that he had gotten lost, but that he was in good spirits. Now, we also have to remember that Jesse did not take the time to acclimate in Juarez. Feeling disorientated or dizzy or unwell would have been expected with the acute mountain sickness. They had breakfast together the next morning, and then they headed off into different directions because they were hiking on different trails. They also said that he seemed prepared and that he had his equipment, so this was such a pivotal point in this investigation because the second sighting was on October 1st, and that was the last time that Jesse was seen. The last people to see him were a group of Czech tourists on the trail. They said that he was struggling to get up to the highest elevation point on the trail, the Punta Union Pass, and apparently he asked them about water because there are some natural water resources, but you need to boil it or use it like a sterile stick or something. So maybe he was asking like, where's the best place to get water? Is there a place to get water near there? And that was the last time that anyone had seen Jesse. So his official date of disappearance was October 1st.
So Magnus, through their detailed methodological searching, has been able to track Jesse right through to the end of the afternoon on the 1st. And all the searches that were done prior were before this information was known. So there was not really a focus in area.
So through these 2 sightings, the investigators were able to get a sense of Jesse's pace, his physical state, and of course where he was. But to this day, not one of his belongings have been found, not a shoe, not a shoelace, nothing. Magnus did come up with a hypothesis based on the witness reports, based on his pace, based on what the witnesses told them about Jesse's demeanor. Their hypothesis is that Jesse was suffering from acute mountain sickness.
What happened? He wasn't in great shape. He was definitely suffering from altitude sickness. There are a lot of symptoms associated with that, disorientation. He was a little dehydrated, and He could have had an accident, or he could have been, attacked by someone. I'm going to bring my son home. I will bring him home in whatever shape he's in. I will do that. That is my goal, and I will reach that goal.
Because there has been no sight of Jesse, like I said, not a shoe, not a shoelace, not a thing, their hypothesis is that maybe Jesse was a victim of the elements and then someone came across his body and moved it. They believe that if Jesse had fallen off a cliff or into the water or in any sort of way where he just kind of perished naturally, that they would have found something by now. They would have found a backpack, they would have found anything. According to interviews that I've listened to with Jesse's mother, Elisa, it apparently is common knowledge that on these trails, if the muleteers or the people who take care of the mules, it's common that if they find a body, they will throw a body into a body of water. Now, that's the thing that I don't really understand, because what is their motive in that? That's one thing that I am kind of like confused about, because my initial thing is like, oh, maybe they don't want reports of people passing away on these treks, so they just try and get rid of the bodies. But then I thought missing people aren't exactly better. So I'm not really sure of what the motive is. So if anyone knows, please leave that down below, because I don't understand the motive of the muleteers or muleteers disposing of bodies. But that's actually pretty common. I actually read a story of a woman who was doing zip lining in Peru, and she had an accident while doing zip lining, and the owner of the zipline company threw her body into a body of water. And I also read a different story of, I believe it was an English tourist who was hiking, and he, I guess, succumbed to the elements. Whether he had ACM, I'm not really sure, but his body was found down a crevice. So they believe that if Jesse had succumbed to the elements or did suffer from acute mountain illness, that they would have found something. And so now at this point, they are meticulously searching through the lagoons, through the bodies of water, hoping to find some evidence of Jesse. This case had a lot of issues. It was like an uphill battle for this poor family. They had to fight so hard for every inch that they got in this investigation. So a big issue on this trail is that the registration logs were either missing or incomplete. And like I said before, that's a big issue, because if they were able to know the people's names or numbers or contact information, they could contact people who were on the same trail as Jesse, or contact people on the other trails who would have passed Jesse. The park guards often left their posts. Jesse's mom, Elisa, said that she barely saw any security on the trail, if any. The registration logs were missing or incomplete, so there is just a lack of organization and security on this trail. Another issue is this terrain is very hard to navigate, and like I mentioned before, Elisa also said that if she had not had a guide, she probably would still be wandering the mountain. There are so many areas on the trail where the road breaks, and without proper signage, it's hard to get an idea of where you should go, what direction you should be heading in. There's also tons of cliffs, tons of little crevices that need to be searched and that are being searched, but like I said, the terrain is massive and there's so many places where Jesse could be. Another issue that I think is terrible is that it's reported that Jesse was wearing all black clothing. It would not be as easy to find someone who was dressed in brighter clothing or clothing that was easily reflective. Another issue was obviously the tech companies not providing or giving the information right away. That took a while to get all the information, and that definitely did not help. Another issue, unfortunately, are the Peruvian authorities. According to his mother, there is a clash of egos between the Peruvian police and Magnus. What she said is Magnus doesn't have an ego. They just want to find Jesse and bring him home. However, as you can expect, I'm sure the police aren't exactly like, oh yeah, come help us because we can't complete the job properly. So there is a little bit of a clash of egos between the police force and Magnus on the side of the police force. His mother also said that they lack professionalism and experience.
Unfortunately, this is Peru. It's not Canada. It's not the same type of level of police system. They don't have the professionalism, they don't have the resources, they don't have the expertise. All of the information that the Peruvian police are working on right now come from Magnus International, the firm that I hired. It's all of the operations that they're doing are being directed by Magnus International. They don't have the ability, they just don't work at that level. There are people that go missing in Peru, Peruvians, and nobody ever looks for them. They just don't do what we do, what I'm doing. Got a tremendous contact who is an ex-Peruvian general, and he's been the one who has been coordinating. He's working with Magnus, and he has authority and respect of the police.
And also, you have to remember that it's obviously a different culture. Even in Greece, it's a different culture. Everywhere is a different culture, especially in third world countries.
So while Magnus can coordinate anything they want in terms of searches, the interrogations must be done by the local authorities. Nobody else has jurisdiction. And there are people that need to be interrogated, so this is where we're pushing. It's a constant, stay on top of it, push them, and another part is interrogations.
However, I am really happy to tell you guys that there is an ex-Peruvian general working alongside Magnus and the police force, and this is really beneficial because he's someone who has earned respect from his colleagues, and he has the relationship with the police force. Magnus can lead the police in the right direction, but if they're not taking that information and interviewing the right people and investigating the right things, then that's as much as they can do. But Magnus is still working very, very hard to find Jesse. Another thing that seems to be working against Jesse's family and the search for Jesse is the fact that the cell phone company in Peru is not really cooperating with the search. I could not find any news sources that said that maybe they had handed over the information. So maybe they have, and that's amazing, but if they haven't, this is something that I found really, really fishy. And there's another thing that I'm going to talk about after this that is also really fishy. Despite having a judicial order for the information from the cell phone companies, the cell phone company has not turned over the information from Jesse's cell phone. In our phones, there is GPS signals, and on the trail or the trek, there were a few cell phone towers that could have possibly picked up Jesse's GPS signal. There's an antenna near Caxapampa, and around the area of Punta Union, which is the area that Jesse was heading, there's also some areas that have pretty good coverage that they could have picked up a GPS signal like a ping. But unfortunately, the cell phone companies are not cooperating, and according to a Magnus team member, this is because of the local authorities and lack of interest, which is super frustrating because if they're able to access Jesse's phone, if they were able to ping it using the GPS signal, then they would be able to kind of see, oh, did he make it to this area? Where did the signal stop? If you remember, I mentioned before that there are people on the mountain called muleteers. If you go with a guided tour, which Jesse didn't, a lot of the times the mules will carry the backpacks, which is really good because that way you don't need to be exerting like extra physical strength because the backpacks are heavy. I know Jesse's was at least 24 pounds at the time he was leaving. When you're already having trouble breathing, trouble walking, increased blood flow, having 24 extra pounds on your back is a lot. Magnus was at the 5th part of their investigation, and that was investigating the local guides, the muleteers, and people that might have been on the trek at the same time as Jesse. Now, what I find a little suspicious is that a lot of the muleteers from different villages were very helpful during the search, and they offered to help and they wanted to help. However, there's one muleteer organization from Caxapampa that has refused to cooperate with the police, which I find very suspicious. And according to the Magnus team member, this is very, very odd. I did not know that there could possibly be cell phone service on the mountain, that Jesse's phone could have possibly pinged while he was there to be able to trace it. And then I also had no idea about the muleteers and the fact that one of the organizations was not cooperating. I cannot imagine how frustrated Jesse's friends and family must be, but I just find that incredibly sketchy. So there are a few theories on what could have happened to Jesse. We've discussed a few of them. So before Jesse was confirmed to be on the trail, a lot of people thought that he may have been abducted. Now, is it possible that he could have been abducted on the trail? Absolutely. But because we know now that he was most likely suffering from acute mountain sickness, their hypothesis is that he may have succumbed to the elements, and a muleteer may have came across his body and disposed of him in a body of water. Another theory is that he may have been attacked on the trail. Because there has been no sightings of him, his body, his belongings, anything, they believe that his body was probably disposed of in a nearby body of water. I wish I had a conclusion to tell you guys about this story. It's a case that I think about all the time. I talk about with my best friend Nikki all the time. She's Jewish, and her mom grew up in the Jewish community and knows Jesse's mom. So Montreal is a pretty small city. I wish that there could be some conclusion to this case, and I'm hoping by maybe sharing Jesse's story with a different sort of audience, maybe reaching people who had never heard about his case, maybe someone who's watching has a loved one who was on the trail or went to Peru or knows something. I think the only thing worse than knowing what happened to your son or loved one is not knowing and being in the dark and always wondering. I've personally followed this case. I follow his dad on Facebook, and it's so heartbreaking because his dad was in Peru for months now, searching, going through villages, posting flyers, posting photos, talking to the local TV stations, newspapers.
So hi everybody, I made it to Punta Union. Not sure if Jesse made it up here. Been trying to get here for 7 months. That was just over there. Punta Union is right behind us. I took a picture, and over here, if you come back to me, here's the lake, here's the glacier. The glacier is here. And I want to say a little prayer today for Jesse. And then tomorrow when I get to base camp 2, that's where we know he was. So God bless you, Jesse. I don't know where you are. I don't know what's happened with you, but I'm here. I love you.
Jesse is so lucky to have two parents who are literally doing everything that they can to bring Jesse home. This search is extensive and it's expensive. They've spent over $1.5 million to search for Jesse. Elisa is very adamant about the fact that none of this would have been possible without the generous donations of people, and so I will be leaving their donation links down below.
I don't really think about how I'm doing. I'm doing what I have to do. The most important thing for me is bringing him home, and when you say I've spent over $1 million, I want to recognize everybody who has donated and who continues to donate, because without those people, I would simply not be able to do this. I just want to thank everybody from the bottom of my heart. The Missing Children's Fund donations and my GoFundMe page, all of that money is going to fund this. So thank you so much.
And every dollar helps. So if you can donate $1 or $5, $10, however much you can, I would strongly urge you to donate and help bring Jesse home and help them find Jesse, because that is any parent's or any person's worst nightmare. And if you can't donate, share this video, not for me, but for Jesse. The more people who know about him, who know his face, who know his story, the better. So awareness is key. And if you know something or see something, say something, not just with Jesse, but with any case. My heart goes out to all of Jesse's family, his friends, his parents, his sister. It's a terrible, terrible thing, and I hope that he is found sooner rather than later. As I'm filming this video, Canada has declared Peru very dangerous. There's a regional advisory that says avoid non-essential travel. One thing I just want to say is if you are going on a trip, I know it's summertime and a lot of people are going to be going on trips, backpacking through Europe. One thing I just want to recommend for you guys to do is leave your passwords with someone you trust. Just write them on a piece of paper. You can change them when you get home, but leave your passwords with someone you trust so that if they do need to get into your Apple ID or if they do need to get into any of your accounts, they don't have to go through what Jesse's family went through with the delays and everything like that. So if you are going on a trip, please leave your passwords with someone you trust. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that some of you may have learned about Jesse and spread the word, get his face out there, get his story out there. I'm gonna go ahead and go. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to check out the links in the description box for more information about how you can help with the search for Jesse. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day or night depending on when you watch this, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.